During the graduation dinner, my daughter-in-law whispered, "She's only here because she still pays the bills." I stayed silent, and when she got the letter from my lawyer about the house mortgage, the truth came out. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. From that moment when everything I thought I knew about my family crumbled with just one whispered sentence. The restaurant was everything Jessica had wanted for her graduation celebration. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, waiters in bow ties gliding between tables like they were performing ballet. My son David had insisted on the most expensive place in town, and of course, I was the one footing the bill. Again. I sat at the far end of the table, watching my granddaughter Emma receive congratulations from everyone.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
22 years old, fresh out of college with her business degree, ready to take on the world. She looked so much like David at that age, full of hope and determination. For a moment, I forgot about the tension that always seemed to follow me at family gatherings. "Grandma, thank you for everything," Emma said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her smile was genuine, warm. At least someone in this family still appreciated what I did for them. "You earned it, sweetheart," I replied, meaning every word. Emma was the one bright spot in what had become an increasingly complicated family. Dynamic, that's when I heard it. Jessica, my daughter-in-law of 8 years, leaning toward her sister Michelle. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "She's only here because she still pays the bills. David would never invite her otherwise." The words hit me like ice water. I kept my face neutral, years of practice hiding my emotions. But inside, something fundamental shifted. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my wine glass. I looked around the table. David was absorbed in conversation with his brother-in-law about some business venture. Emma was showing photos on her phone to her cousin. No one else had heard Jessica's comment, but it echoed in my head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. 8 years. 8 years of birthdays, holidays, graduations, and family dinners where I played the role of the generous mother-in-law. 8 years of paying for everything from their mortgage payments when money was tight to Emma's private school, tuition. 8 years of believing I was helping my son build a good life for his family. And this whole time, Jessica saw me as nothing more than a checkbook with legs. I excused myself to go to the restroom, needing a moment to process what I'd heard. In the mirror, I saw a 63-year-old woman who had spent the last decade putting everyone else's needs before her own. My gray hair was perfectly styled, my makeup flawless, my dress expensive but appropriate. I looked like what I was, a successful widow with means who had devoted herself to her family, but apparently that devotion was seen as something transactional. When I returned to the table, I watched my family with new eyes. Jessica's smile seemed forced when she looked at me. David was polite, but distant, the way you might be with an obligation rather than your mother. Even the way they arranged the seating suddenly made sense. I wasn't positioned as the honored guest, but rather as the necessary evil who made gatherings like this possible. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I made appropriate comments, smiled at the right moments, and played my part perfectly. But inside, I was calculating. Not just the cost of tonight's dinner, but everything. Every payment I'd made, every emergency I'd covered, every time I'd opened my wallet because family needed help. As we prepared to leave, Jessica made a show of thanking me for the lovely evening. Her hug felt hollow, performed for an audience. "You're so generous, Margaret," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "We're so lucky to have you." Lucky. As if my presence in their lives was some kind of windfall rather than the natural bond between a mother and her child. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. The house felt too quiet when I walked in, too empty. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my study, surrounded by family photos that suddenly felt like evidence of my own foolishness. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jessica's words played on repeat, but they also opened a door to memories I'd pushed aside. The way David's calls had become less frequent over the years, except when he needed something. How invitations to family events often came with subtle hints about expenses. The way Jessica's eyes would light up when she talked about things they wanted but couldn't afford. always followed by that particular pause that meant she was hoping I'd offer to help. I had thought I was being a good mother, a helpful grandmother. But maybe I had actually been buying my place at their table all along. By morning, I had made a decision. I needed to know exactly how much I had spent on my son's family over the years. Not estimates or rough calculations, but precise figures. I needed to understand the true cost of what Jessica saw as my ticket to their tolerance. I pulled out my financial records and began to tally the numbers. The mortgage payments when David lost his job 3 years ago. Emma's tuition and expenses. The down payment on Jessica's car. Vacation contributions. Emergency repairs on their house. Christmas and birthday gifts that grew more expensive each year. The total made me sit back in shock. Over the past 8 years, I had given them over $200,000. Not loans. Gifts. Money I had freely given because I believed in helping family, because I wanted to see them succeed, because I loved them. But love, apparently, was not what they felt in return. I closed the files and made another decision. It was time to have a conversation with my lawyer. The numbers stared back at me from the spreadsheet like accusations. $214,637. That's what being a loving mother had cost me over 8 years. I pushed back from my desk and walked to the kitchen, my legs feeling unsteady. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I tried to process what I'd discovered. This wasn't just about money. It was about the systematic way I'd been taken advantage of, all while believing I was doing the right thing. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Thanks again for last night, Mom. Jessica loved the restaurant. You're the best." The casual tone made my stomach turn. No mention of the cost, no acknowledgement of what I'd actually provided. Just empty gratitude that felt more like habit than genuine appreciation. I scrolled through my phone, looking at old messages. The pattern was there once I knew what to look for. David's calls usually came when they needed something, disguised as family check-ins. "Hey, Mom, how are you? By the way, we're having some trouble with." It was always something. Car repairs, medical bills, home improvements, Emma's expenses. And I had said yes every single time. The worst part was remembering how good it had made me feel initially. After Robert died 5 years ago, I'd been lost, drowning in grief and loneliness. Helping David's family had given me purpose, made me feel needed and valuable. I thought I was investing in relationships, building bonds that would last. Instead, I had been training them to see me as a solution to their financial problems, rather than as a person deserving of love and respect. I called my lawyer, Patricia Chen, who had handled Robert's estate and remained our family attorney. Her voice was professionally warm when she answered. "Margaret, how nice to hear from you. How can I help?" "Patricia, I need to discuss some financial arrangements I've made with my family. Specifically, I want to understand my legal position regarding certain investments." There was a pause. Patricia had known our family for over a decade. She understood the subtext. "Would you like to come in this week? I have time Thursday afternoon." "Yes, please. And Patricia, I need you to pull all the documentation related to David's house, the mortgage paperwork, everything." "Of course. Is everything all right?" I stared out my kitchen window at the garden Robert and I had planted together, now maintained by a service I paid for because I no longer had the energy to care for it myself. "I'm not sure yet, but I need to know exactly where I stand." Thursday. Couldn't come fast enough. I spent the intervening days reviewing bank statements, credit card bills, and checkbook registers. The deeper I dug, the more disturbing the picture became. In 2019, when David claimed they were struggling with their mortgage, I had paid 3 months of their housing costs, $18,000. But their social media from that same period showed expensive dinners out, a weekend trip to Napa Valley, and Jessica's new designer handbags. Either they had lied about their financial situation, or they had priorities that didn't align with the emergency they'd described to me. Found the vacation photos from Emma's high school graduation trip to Europe. I had contributed $15,000 to that adventure, believing it was a once-in-a-lifetime educational opportunity. But looking at the pictures now, I noticed things I'd missed before. The luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, shopping sprees. The trip I'd helped fund had been far more extravagant than what they'd described to me. Each discovery felt like a small betrayal, but together they painted a picture of systematic deception. My phone rang Tuesday evening. David's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in years, I hesitated before answering. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling? You seemed a little quiet at dinner the other night." Had I? I thought I'd hidden my reaction to Jessica's comment perfectly. "I'm fine, just tired. It was a lovely evening." Good. Listen, I wanted to run something by you. Emma's looking at graduate programs, and there are some amazing opportunities, but the costs are. He trailed off in that familiar way. "How much?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Well, it's not cheap. The program she's interested in is about $40,000 a year, and it's a 2-year commitment. But Mom, this could really set her up for life. You know how competitive the job market is these days. $80,000. He was asking for $80,000 like it was a reasonable request, like it was my obligation to fund his daughter's education. David, that's a substantial amount." "I know, and we wouldn't ask if we had other options. But you've always said education is the best investment, right? And Emma's such a good kid. She deserves this chance." The manipulation was so smooth I almost missed it. Appealing to my stated values, using Emma as leverage, making it seem like I'd be denying my granddaughter opportunities if I said no. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course. Take your time. But the application deadline is coming up, so..." Another pressure tactic. Create urgency so I wouldn't have time to consider it properly. After we hung up, I sat in silence. This was how it had always worked. They presented their needs as emergencies or opportunities that couldn't be missed. They used my love for Emma and my desire to be helpful against me, and I had fallen for it every single time. Thursday afternoon, I sat across from Patricia in her downtown office. She had spread various documents across her conference table, and her expression was carefully neutral in the way lawyers get when they're about to deliver news you won't like. "Margaret, I've reviewed everything you asked me to look at. Tell me, what specifically are you concerned about?" I took a deep breath and told her about Jessica's comment, about the pattern of financial requests, about my growing suspicion that I was being taken advantage of. Patricia nodded slowly. "I see. Well, let me share what I've found, and then we can discuss your options." She pulled out a thick folder. "First, regarding David's house. When he purchased it 8 years ago, you co-signed the mortgage and provided the down payment. However, the deed shows something interesting." My heart rate picked up. "What kind of interesting?" "According to the property records, you're not just a co-signer. You're listed as a joint owner with right of survivorship. Essentially, you own 50% of that house." I stared at her. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that legally, you have rights to that property. You can't be excluded from decisions about it. If they wanted to sell it, you'd have to agree. And if they default on the mortgage, you have the legal standing to take action to protect your investment." The room felt like it was spinning. "Are you saying I could force them out of the house?" "Not exactly, but you could require them to either buy out your share or sell the property and split the proceeds. You have substantial legal leverage that I'm not sure you've been aware of." Patricia pulled out another document. "There's more. The car you helped Jessica purchase 2 years ago? The loan is in your name. Legally, it's your car that you're allowing her to use." I felt sick. How did this happen? How did I not know? "Margaret, you trusted your family to explain these arrangements to you. You signed documents based on their representations. It's not uncommon, especially in families. But it does mean your legal position is quite different from what you might have assumed." She leaned forward. "The question is, what do you want to do with this information?" I looked out her office window at the city below. Somewhere out there, David and Jessica were going about their day, probably planning how to approach me about Emma's graduate school funding. They had no idea that their financial benefactor had just discovered she held far more power than anyone had realized. "I need time to think," I said. "Of course. But Margaret, whatever you decide, remember that you have options. You're not powerless here, not anymore." As I drove home, Jessica's words echoed in my mind. "She's only here because she still pays the bills." Maybe it was time to find out what happened when the bills stopped being paid. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I said no. David called Friday evening about Emma's graduate school funding, his voice carrying that familiar tone of assumed agreement. He'd already started making plans, discussing application deadlines and program requirements, as if my financial support was a foregone conclusion. Mom, I was thinking we could set up a payment plan. Maybe you could cover the first semester up front, and then we could figure out the rest as we go. David, I'm not going to fund Emma's graduate school. Silence. Complete, stunned silence. What? Do you mean? I thought. I mean, I always say yes, but not this time. Mom, is everything okay? You're not sick, are you? This isn't like you. There it was. The assumption that something must be wrong with me for refusing to open my wallet. The idea that saying no to an $80,000 request was somehow out of character rather than perfectly reasonable. I'm fine, David. I'm just not funding any more of your family's expenses. But Emma's future is at stake here. You've always said education is important. Emma's future is her responsibility. And yours. She's 22 years old with a college degree. She can get loans like everyone else. The conversation devolved quickly after that. David alternated between guilt trips and logical arguments, trying every angle he'd successfully used before. When he finally realized I wasn't budging, his tone shifted to something I'd never heard directed at me before. Cold anger. Fine, Mom. I hope you're happy with your decision. Emma's going to be heartbroken that her own grandmother doesn't believe in her enough to help. He hung up before I could respond. I sat holding the phone, shaking with adrenaline and something that felt like relief. An hour later, my phone buzzed, with a text from Jessica. Margaret, David told me about your conversation. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Could we talk? I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Emma stood on my doorstep, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. My heart clenched seeing her distress, but I reminded myself that this conversation was inevitable. Grandma, can I come in? I need to understand what's happening. We sat in my living room, the same space where I'd hosted countless family gatherings, where Emma had played as a child while the adults talked over coffee and dessert. Dad says you won't help with grad school. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong? The pain in her voice nearly broke my resolve. This was the hardest part. Emma genuinely didn't understand the dynamics that had brought us to this point. Sweetheart, you haven't done anything wrong. But I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Over the years, what has your father told you about the money I've given your family? Emma shifted uncomfortably. He said you liked to help because it made you feel good to take care of us. That you had more money than you needed and it was important to you to make sure we were okay. Did he ever mention that I co-signed your house mortgage? Or that I'm part owner of your home? Her face went blank. What? No, that can't be right. It's their house. I got up and retrieved the documents Patricia had given me. These are the property records, Emma. When your parents bought that house, I didn't just help with the down payment. I became a legal co-owner. She studied the papers, her frown deepening. I don't understand. Why wouldn't they tell me this? That's a question you'll have to ask them. We talked for another hour. I explained as gently as I could about the pattern of financial requests, about the total amount I'd given over the years, about Jessica's comment at the restaurant. Emma listened with growing shock. Grandma, I had no idea. I mean, I knew you helped out sometimes, but I thought it was just normal grandparent stuff, like helping with college tuition. Your entire college education cost me $68,000, Emma. That's not normal grandparent stuff. She was quiet for a long time. So you're cutting us off? Completely? I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. But what about my parents, if you own half their house? I don't know yet. I'm still figuring that out. After Emma left, I spent the rest of the weekend researching my options. Patricia had given me homework to review all the documentation and decide what outcome I wanted before taking any action. The more I learned, the more complex the situation became. Not only did I have significant ownership stakes in properties I'd helped purchase, but I'd also been systematically excluded from decisions about those assets. David and Jessica had refinanced the house twice without consulting me, despite my legal interest in the property. They'd taken out a home equity loan against my investment without my knowledge. When I called Patricia Monday morning, my voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. I've reviewed everything. I want to take action to protect my interests. What kind of action, Margaret? I want them to know exactly what my legal position is. I want them to understand that they can't continue treating me like a bank while ignoring my rights as a co-owner. Are you prepared for their reaction? This will likely cause significant family conflict. I thought about Jessica's whispered comment, about years of being taken for granted, about David's cold anger when I'd finally said no. Patricia, the conflict already exists. I've just been the only one trying to avoid it. All right. I'll draft a letter outlining your legal position and your rights regarding the various assets. It will be formal but not threatening. Think of it as clarifying the situation. How long will that take? I can have something ready by Wednesday. Good. Send it certified mail to their home address. Tuesday evening, David called. His voice was tense, almost frantic. Mom, Emma told me about your conversation yesterday. I think there's been some kind of mistake with the paperwork you showed her. What kind of mistake? About the house. You're not an owner. You just helped us with the down payment. I have all the documents right here. David, I suggest you look at those documents more carefully. Specifically, the deed. Long pause. I'm looking at it now. Another pause. Longer this time. This doesn't make sense. When did this happen? 8 years ago, when you bought the house. You said having me on the deed would help with the mortgage. Approval because of my credit score. Don't you remember? But I thought that was just temporary, for the application process. Apparently not. Mom, this is crazy. You can't seriously be threatening to take our house. I'm not threatening anything, David. I'm simply making sure everyone understands the actual legal situation. It seems there's been some confusion about who owns what. What do you want? Money? Is this about money? The question hit me like a slap. Even now, even faced with evidence of his family's deception and ingratitude, David still thought this was about money. No, David. This isn't about money. This is about respect. This is about being treated like a human being instead of an ATM. This is about honesty in our family relationships. I don't understand what you're talking about. You will. You're going to receive a letter from my attorney this week. Read it carefully. Then we'll talk. I hung up before he could respond. Wednesday afternoon, Patricia called to confirm the letter had been sent. Thursday morning, my phone started ringing nonstop. I let every call go to voicemail. By Friday, I had 17 unread messages. I finally listened to them that evening, one by one. The progression was fascinating to track. David's voice went from confused to angry to panicked. Jessica left 3 messages, each one more frantic than the last. Even Emma called, sounding shaken and upset. The final message was from David, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Mom, I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop. We're a family. Families don't threaten each other with lawyers. Call me back so we can resolve this like adults. I deleted all the messages and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow I would call Patricia and discuss the next steps. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life. And that feeling was worth more than all the money I'd ever given them. The emergency family meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at my house. David had called Saturday morning, his voice stripped of its usual casual confidence, replaced by something I'd never heard from him before, genuine worry. Mom, we need to talk. All of us. This has gotten out of hand. I agreed to the meeting but set my own terms. 2:00. And David? Come prepared to have an honest conversation about our family's financial arrangements. I spent Saturday cleaning house, not because it needed cleaning, but because I needed something to do with my hands while my mind processed what was about to happen. This meeting would either repair our relationship on more honest terms or end it entirely. Either outcome felt better than the limbo I'd been living in. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood. I dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. I wanted to look like someone who deserved respect, not someone who could be dismissed or manipulated. They arrived precisely at 2. David looked haggard, like he hadn't been sleeping well. Jessica's usual polished appearance seemed forced, her smile too bright and brittle. Emma hung back, clearly uncomfortable with the tension she could feel, but didn't fully understand. We settled in the living room, the same space where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays. But today, the familiar furniture felt like props in a stage play where no one was quite sure of their lines. David cleared his throat. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the legal documents Patricia sent us." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Jessica leaned forward, her voice carefully modulated. "Margaret, we had no idea you felt unappreciated. If we'd known our gratitude wasn't coming through clearly." "This isn't about gratitude, Jessica. This is about honesty." "We've always been honest with you," David protested. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared. "David, when you refinanced the house 3 years ago, did you inform me?" His face went pale. What do you mean?" "As a co-owner of the property, I should have been notified of any changes to the mortgage. I should have been asked to sign off on the refinancing. But I wasn't even told it was happening." "Mom, that was just paperwork," the lawyer said. "What lawyer?" "Because Patricia tells me that any refinancing without my consent was potentially fraudulent." The word fraudulent hung in the air like a bomb. Jessica's face went white. "Now wait. Just a minute," she said, her voice rising. "We would never..." "Never what? Never take advantage of me? Never lie about your financial situation? Never treat me like a walking checkbook?" Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Grandma, maybe we should all calm down and..." "No, Emma. This conversation should have happened years ago." I opened the folder and pulled out my calculations. "I want to review some numbers with you. Over the past 8 years, I have given this family $214,000. Not loaned, given. I've received exactly $0 in repayment." David's mouth opened and closed without sound. "During that same period, I've been excluded from family decisions, treated as a guest in my son's life rather than a participant, and apparently discussed behind my back as someone who's only tolerated because of what I provide financially." Jessica's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. "That's not fair. We never said you were only tolerated." "Really? Because last week at Emma's graduation dinner, you whispered to your sister that I was only there because I still pay the bills." Emma gasped. Jessica's face went from white to red. That's not. You heard wrong." "I heard exactly what you said, Jessica, and it clarified a lot of things for me." David found his voice. "Mom, even if Jessica said something inappropriate, that doesn't mean we don't love you." "Love me? David, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to something that didn't require me to pay for it? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of your personal bank?" The silence stretched unbearably. "I thought so," I continued. "Now, let's talk about what happens next." I pulled out another document. "This is a property assessment for your house. Current market value is approximately $420,000. As a 50% owner, my share is worth about $210,000. "What are you saying?" David asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. "I'm saying I want to discuss how to handle my ownership stake. We have several options. You can buy out my share, we can sell the property and split the proceeds, or we can formalize our co-ownership arrangement with proper legal documentation and shared decision-making." Jessica stood up abruptly. "This is blackmail." "No, Jessica. Blackmail would be threatening to expose something illegal unless you pay me. This is a business discussion about assets I legally own." "But this is our home," David said quietly. "Emma grew up here, and I helped make that possible. But that doesn't give you the right to treat me badly or exclude me from decisions about my own investment." Emma finally spoke up. "What do you want from us, Grandma? Just tell us what you want." I looked at my granddaughter, this young woman I loved so much, and felt my heart break a little. "I want to be treated like I matter, Emma. Not because of what I can give you, but because I'm your grandmother and David's mother." "You do matter," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Do I? Because your actions suggest otherwise. The house refinancing, the home equity loan you took out last year, the vacation expenses you've charged to the equity without consulting me. None of that suggests I matter to you. You took out a home equity loan? Emma asked, staring at her. Parents. David and Jessica exchanged glances. It was for home improvements, Jessica said defensively. What improvements? I asked. Because I've been to your house regularly, and I haven't seen any significant changes. More silence. The loan was for $50,000, I continued, against my investment in your home, without my knowledge or consent. Emma looked stunned. Where did the money go? That's not really. Jessica started. Jessica's credit card debt, David said quietly. And some other expenses. The truth was finally coming out, piece by piece. Not home improvements, not emergencies, not investments in the family's future. Credit card debt and other expenses. So you used my investment as collateral to pay for Jessica's shopping habits? It wasn't like that, Jessica protested, but her voice was weak. What was it like then? No, answer, no, answer. I closed the folder and looked at each of them in turn. Here's what's going to happen. You have 30 days to decide how you want to handle my ownership stake in the house. Patricia will be in touch with options and timelines. And if we can't buy you out? David asked. Then we'll explore other options. But the current arrangement, where I'm financially responsible but legally ignored, is ending. I stood up. I love you all. But love without respect isn't enough. Anymore. As they prepared to leave, Emma lingered behind. Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't know about any of this. I know, sweetheart. This isn't your fault. What's going to happen to us? I hugged her tightly. You're going to learn that actions have consequences, and hopefully, you're going to build better relationships with the people who love you. After they left, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but the calm that comes from finally telling the truth. My phone rang that evening. Patricia's name appeared on the screen. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as expected. They're shocked, defensive, and scared. Any indication of how they want to proceed? Not yet, but Patricia? I want you to do some more research. I want to know about that home equity loan, the refinancing, all of it. I want to understand exactly what they've done with my investment. Already on it. Margaret, you should know that some of what they've done might have legal implications beyond just property ownership. What do you mean? Using your ownership. Interest as collateral without your consent could be considered fraud. The refinancing without notification might have violated your rights as a co-owner. There could be grounds for more serious legal action if you choose to pursue it. I stared out my window at the dark street. Somewhere out there, David and Jessica were probably having a very different conversation than they'd ever had before. They were learning what it felt like to have their security threatened, to face consequences for their choices. Let's see how they respond first, I said. But I want to know all my options. Of course. Margaret, you're doing the right thing. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in Robert's old chair. For the first time since his death, I felt like I was honoring his memory properly. He had worked hard for everything we built together, and he would have been appalled to see how I'd let our son take advantage of his inheritance. The phone rang again. David's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Tomorrow they would start learning what life looked like when they actually had to face the consequences of their choices, and I would start learning what it felt like to be respected instead of just utilized. The game had finally changed, and for the first time in years, I was the one holding the winning hand. 2 weeks after our family meeting, the facade finally shattered completely. I was having coffee with my neighbor Helen when my doorbell rang insistently. Through the window, I could see Jessica pacing on my front porch, her face flushed, and her usually perfect hair disheveled. Margaret, we need to talk right now, she demanded the moment I opened the door. Helen discreetly gathered her purse. I should head home. Call me later. Jessica pushed past me into the living room without invitation. This has gone far enough. You're destroying our family over money. I'm protecting my interests, Jessica. There's a difference. Protecting your interests? Her voice cracked with hysteria. We can't refinance. We can't get another loan. We can't do anything because of your ridiculous legal demands. I remained calm. You mean you can't use my investment as collateral without my permission anymore? David is falling apart. He hasn't slept in days. Emma is confused and scared. Are you happy now? I'm not happy about anyone's distress, but I'm not responsible for the situation you've created. Jessica's composure, always brittle, finally shattered completely. You bitter old woman. You've been jealous of our happiness from the beginning. You can't stand that David chose me over your controlling behavior. The mask was finally off. Years of fake smiles and manufactured gratitude disappeared, revealing the contempt that had been there all along. Is that what you think this is about? Jealousy? What else could it be? You're a lonely widow who can't accept that your son has moved on. So you use money to control us, to force your way into our lives. Jessica, you whispered to your sister that I was only at Emma's graduation because I pay the bills. That suggests you're the one who sees this relationship as transactional. Her face reddened further. I was frustrated. You don't understand what it's like having someone constantly hanging over your family, always reminding you of what they've done for you. When have I ever reminded you of what I've done for you? You don't have to say it. It's in every look, every comment about how expensive things are, every time you make us feel guilty for accepting your help. I stared at her, genuinely confused. Jessica, I have never made comments about expense or tried to make you feel guilty. I gave freely because I thought I was helping family. You gave because it made you feel important, because it gave you power over us. If I wanted power over you, don't you think I would have used it before now? She had no answer for that. The front door opened, and David walked in, looking haggard. I saw your car outside, he said to Jessica. What are you doing? Here? I'm trying to talk sense into your mother before she ruins everything we've built. David sank into a chair. Mom, please. Can't we work this out? As a family? David, I've been trying to work things out as a family for 8 years, but a family requires mutual respect and honesty. We haven't had either. What do you want from us? Jessica demanded. Just tell us what you want, and let's end this. I want you to buy out my share of the house or agree to sell it and split the proceeds. I want the car loan transferred to your name, and I want you to acknowledge that the $200,000 I've given you over the years was a gift, not an investment in being treated poorly. We can't afford to buy you out, David said quietly. You know that. Then we sell the house. Jessica exploded. You want to make us homeless? Your own son and granddaughter? I want you to take responsibility for your own lives instead of expecting me to subsidize them indefinitely. This is insane, Jessica said, turning to David. Tell her this is insane. David was quiet for a long moment. Mom, if we sell the house, where are we supposed to go? The same place any other family goes when they need housing. You find something you can afford on your own income. But Emma's still living with us. She's just starting her career. Emma is 22 years old with a college degree. She can find her own place or contribute to household expenses. Jessica's voice turned vicious. You're just a selfish old woman who can't stand that we don't need you anymore. Jessica, you called me 2 days ago asking for money to fix your car. Yesterday David asked if I could help with the electric bill. How exactly do you not need me? The truth hung between us like a sword. David finally spoke. What if we agreed to pay you back? Over time? With what money? You just said, you can't afford to buy me out. We could work out a payment plan. David, stop. Please just stop. I felt exhausted suddenly. For 8 years, you've lived beyond your means because you knew I would cover the difference. You've made financial decisions based on my availability as a backup plan, rather than your actual income. That has to end. So you're cutting us off. Completely? David asked. I'm requiring you to live within your actual means instead of mine. Jessica stood up abruptly. Fine. You want to play hardball? 2 can play that game. What does that mean? It means Emma doesn't have to have a relationship with a grandmother who puts money before family. It means you can sit in this big, empty house alone, counting your precious dollars. The threat to cut me off from Emma was designed to hurt, and it did. But it also revealed just how little Jessica understood about what was actually happening. Jessica, you're threatening to use my granddaughter as a weapon because I won't continue to be financially exploited. Do you hear yourself? David looked up sharply. That's not what she meant. Yes, it is. She's threatening to deny me access to Emma unless I continue funding your lifestyle. That's exactly what she meant. We would never use Emma as leverage, David protested, but his voice lacked conviction. You just did. I walked to the door and opened it. I think you should leave now. Patricia will be in touch about the next steps. As they prepared to go, Jessica turned back one more time. You're going to regret this, Margaret. Family is supposed to forgive and support each other. You're right, Jessica. Family is supposed to support each other. But support goes both ways, and forgiveness requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing, which neither of you has offered. After they left, I called Patricia. They're not going to cooperate, I told her. Jessica threatened to cut me off from Emma, and David is still trying to negotiate payment plans he can't afford. Are you ready to proceed with formal action? I looked around my quiet house, filled with memories of a family that had apparently never really existed the way I thought it did. Yes. I want to force the sale of the house and recover what I can of my investment. And Patricia, I want you to investigate that home equity loan. If they used my ownership interest fraudulently, I want to know my options. Understood. Margaret, this is going to get uglier before it gets better. It can't get much uglier than it already is. But I was wrong about that. Within 24 hours, I would discover just how wrong I was. 6 months later, I stood in my new townhouse kitchen, smaller than my old home, but perfectly suited to my actual needs. Through the window, I could see Emma's car pulling into the driveway for our weekly lunch date. The legal proceedings had taken 4 months to resolve. Patricia's investigation revealed that David and Jessica had indeed used my ownership interest fraudulently to secure multiple loans. The home equity loan, the refinancing, even a second mortgage I'd never known about, all leveraged against my investment without my knowledge or consent. In the end, the house sold for $430,000. After paying off the various loans David and Jessica had secured against it, my share came to $185,000. Not everything I'd invested over the years, but enough to reclaim my financial independence. Hi, Grandma, Emma called as she let herself in. Our relationship had survived the family upheaval, though it took months of honest conversations to rebuild trust. Hello, sweetheart. How was your week? Emma had moved out of her parents' house during the legal proceedings, finding a small apartment and a job at a nonprofit. The transition to true independence had been challenging but ultimately empowering for her. Busy but good. I got a promotion at work. They're making me a program coordinator. That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. We settled at my small dining table with sandwiches and tea, a ritual we'd established after everything settled. How are your parents doing? I asked. I genuinely wanted to know, despite everything that had happened. They're adjusting. Dad found a steady job finally, and they rented a smaller house across town. Mom had to take a part-time job too. It's been hard for them, but I think they're starting to understand what you were trying to tell them. David and Jessica had been forced to confront their actual financial situation without my safety net. The adjustment had been painful, but necessary. David's calls to me had gradually shifted from angry demands to tentative apologies as reality set in. Have they said anything about our situation? Emma chose her words carefully. Dad says he understands why you did what you did. Mom is still angry, but she's starting to admit that some of the things she said were unfair. And how do you feel about everything? Honestly, I'm grateful. Not for the conflict, but for learning the truth about how families should work. I never want to be dependent on someone else the way my parents were dependent on you. This was the victory I hadn't expected. Emma's growth into true adulthood, taking responsibility for her own choices and building her own life. My doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the window, I could see David standing on my porch, holding a small wrapped package. Did you know he was coming? I asked Emma. He asked if I thought you'd be willing to see him. I told him I didn't know, but that he could try. I opened the door to find my son looking older and more worn than when I'd last seen him, but also somehow more solid, more real. Hi, Mom. I was hoping we could talk. I invited him in, and the three of us sat in my living room. The space felt different from our old family gatherings. Smaller, more intimate, but also more honest. "I brought you something," David said, handing me the package. It's not much, but inside was a small framed photo of us from Emma's high school graduation, before Jessica entered our family, before things became complicated. We looked genuinely happy together. "I found it when we were packing to move," David continued. "It reminded me of who we used to be. Who I used to be." "David. No, let me say this. You were right about everything. We did take advantage of you. We did treat you like a bank instead of a mother. And Jessica's comment at the restaurant. There's no excuse for that." His voice cracked slightly. "I don't know when I stopped seeing you as my mom and started seeing you as a solution to our problems, but somewhere along the way, I forgot that you're a person with feelings and needs, not just someone who existed to make our lives easier." The apology I'd waited years to hear finally came, but it felt different than I'd imagined, less like vindication and more like sadness for time lost. "I've missed you," he said simply. "I've missed you too. Is there any chance? Could we try to rebuild our relationship? On different terms this time?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who had lost his way, but seemed to be finding it again, and felt something shift in my chest. I'd like that. But things will be different. I know, and they should be. We talked for 2 hours that afternoon, not about money or obligations or what anyone owed anyone else, but about life, about mistakes, about the possibility of doing better. It felt like the first real conversation we'd had in years. As David prepared to leave, he turned back one more time. "Mom, I know this might sound strange, but forcing us to face reality was the best thing you could have done for our family, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. It didn't feel good for me either, David. But sometimes love means refusing to enable destructive behavior. I understand that now." After he left, Emma and I finished our lunch in comfortable silence. "So, what happens next?" she asked. "We build something new, something honest." That evening, I sat in my small living room with a cup of tea and felt truly peaceful for the first time in years. I had lost a house but gained my dignity. I had lost financial control over my family, but gained authentic relationships with the people who truly mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when you had every reason to." I typed back, "Family doesn't give up, but family also doesn't accept being mistreated. Understood. See you next week?" I'd like that. I set the phone down and looked around my new space. It was smaller, simpler, but it was mine on my own terms. No one lived here because I paid for their presence. No one tolerated me because of what I could provide. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past my window, and I thought about cycles ending and beginning. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading the future or mourning the past. I was simply present, in a life that finally belonged, completely to me. Jessica's words still echoed sometimes. She's only here because she still pays the bills. But they no longer hurt. Instead, they served as a reminder of what I would never allow again. Love that had to be purchased, respect that came with a price tag, family relationships built on obligation rather than genuine affection. I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in your own diminishment. Sometimes protecting others means forcing them to face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes the best gift you can give your family is teaching them to stand on their own. The bill paying had stopped, but I was still here. And now, finally, so were they.